In Washington, the message is becoming clearer. America's goal is to reorient global supply chains away from China. And Beijing, fully aware of that, appears ready to endure enormous domestic pain to maintain control over critical industries. Yet, this latest move might be the moment China realizes its own limits. In mid-September, trade delegations from both nations met in Madrid, Spain, for high-stakes negotiations. On September 14th and 15th, the two sides hammered out details aimed at easing months of economic tension. Both parties agreed on a temporary truce, no new tariffs, no new export controls, until a final deal could be signed. The next summit was set for late October in Malaysia, where President Trump and Xi Jinping would meet face-to-face at the South Asian Economic Cooperation Summit. But something happened in Madrid that would alter the tone of those talks entirely. According to several reports, China's chief negotiator left the meeting convinced that the United States was too eager to close the deal. That perception, that Washington was desperate, convinced Beijing it could apply more pressure and walk away with better terms. That single miscalculation sparked one of the most dramatic escalations of the trade war so far. Since Liberation Day on April 2nd, the United States has maintained a 30% tariff on Chinese imports. It's far below the original 145% tariff that President Trump announced earlier that year, but still enough to strain Chinese factories and squeeze profits. Beijing wanted the US to lift that tariff and believed it could use its dominance over critical minerals to make that happen. Then came the economic shock. Late one evening, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce released an announcement that caught the entire world off guard. From that moment forward, any foreign company wanting to re-export or manufacture abroad products containing more than 0.1% Chinese-controlled materials or using Chinese-origin rare earth technology would need an export license directly from Beijing. That's not a typo. Even 0.1% of Chinese material would trigger the rule. This meant that virtually every country producing electronics, electric vehicles, or advanced machinery would have to ask permission from the Chinese Communist Party before shipping anything to the United States. Considering that China controls more than 90% of the world's rare earth refining capacity, it effectively handed Beijing the ability to decide which nations could access the raw materials, powering the modern world. It was, in every sense, an economic weapon, and it stunned Washington. The move wasn't limited to rare earth elements either. Beijing also placed export bans on lithium batteries and artificial graphite anodes, two critical ingredients for renewable energy systems, electric vehicles, and AI-powered devices. The timing was unmistakable. The Trump-Xi meeting in Malaysia was only 2 weeks away. China wanted leverage, and it wanted it fast. By weaponizing rare earths, it hoped to force the US into dropping tariffs before the summit. But this time, Washington was ready. Inside the Treasury Department, officials had been tracking Chinese trade behavior for months. They knew Beijing was considering using rare earths as leverage. Similar tactics had been attempted before and failed. The US had quietly built contingencies to keep the flow of critical materials stable. Still, China's latest move was bolder and riskier than anything seen before. Analysts began calling it an economic Pearl Harbor. On Wall Street and in defense circles, the alarm bells rang. Some described it as the 21st century's Sputnik moment, a wake-up call revealing just how far China was willing to go to control global technology supply chains. Within hours, President Trump responded. His statement was firm, unfiltered, and historic. It has just been learned that China has taken an extraordinarily aggressive position on trade, sending a hostile letter to the world stating that they will, effective November 1st, impose large-scale export controls on virtually every product they make, and even some products not made by them. This affects all countries without exception and was clearly planned years ago. It is absolutely unheard of in international trade and a moral disgrace in dealing with other nations. Based on this action, and speaking only for the United States of America, starting November 1st, the US will impose a tariff of 100% on China over and above any tariff they are currently paying. That means the original 30% plus another 100%. Chinese factories will now face a 130% tariff on anything they want to sell to the United States. Also, on November 1st, we will impose export controls on all critical software. It is impossible to believe that China would take such an action, but they have. And the rest is history. That announcement changed everything. Beijing believed Washington's eagerness for a deal was its weakness. In reality, America's leverage came from the opposite, China's growing economic fragility. The Chinese economy is wobbling under the weight of a massive real estate crisis. Property developers are collapsing, consumer confidence is eroding, and factories are struggling to stay open. By escalating the trade war, Beijing risks suffocating the very industries that fuel its own economy. The truth is simple. China needs the United States far more than the United States needs China. For decades, Chinese factories thrived because of access to American consumers. No other country buys as much as the United States. And while Chinese manufacturers can't easily find alternative markets, American consumers can shift purchases elsewhere, to Vietnam, India, Mexico, or Indonesia. These countries are eager to become the next global manufacturing hub, waiting for their chance to replace China in the supply chain hierarchy. This imbalance gives Washington the upper hand. The irony of the situation was highlighted perfectly by the aviation dispute. Earlier this year, Xi Jinping ordered Chinese airlines to stop buying Boeing aircraft as a show of strength. But the timing was disastrous. Many Chinese carriers had already placed Boeing orders years in advance. Refusing those planes meant losing revenue and passengers. Meanwhile, Xi himself continued to travel aboard a Boeing 747. Even Chinese citizens noticed the hypocrisy. On social media, people questioned why their leader was boycotting American planes while personally flying in one. President Trump capitalized on that contradiction. When asked whether the US would expand export controls, he replied, "We have a lot more on the table: airplanes, airplane parts, and much more. They have many Boeing planes, and they need parts and servicing. This isn't something we initiated, it's a response." China didn't just target us, they targeted the entire world. That statement underscored a critical point. China's aggressive trade behavior has alienated not just the US, but much of the global economy. For years, countries tolerated China's dominance because of convenience. Cheap production, quick turnaround, and vast capacity made Beijing indispensable. But now the world is seeing the risk of relying too heavily on a single supplier. China's attempt to weaponize trade has backfired, accelerating a global realignment of supply chains. Across Asia, governments are quietly diversifying partnerships. Japan has invested billions in rare earth alternatives and recycling programs. India is expanding its semiconductor and battery industries. Southeast Asian economies are building export infrastructure aimed directly at US and European markets. Even Mexico has become a surprising winner, as manufacturers relocate to North America to avoid tariffs and uncertainty. China's rare earth ban was supposed to demonstrate dominance. Instead, it revealed vulnerability and overdependence on global demand and a weakening domestic economy. Inside Beijing, frustration is mounting. Factories are cutting shifts. Youth unemployment has hit record highs. The property sector, once a symbol of Chinese prosperity, is collapsing under its own debt. And with each retaliatory move, foreign companies are accelerating their exit. What was meant to be China's masterstroke has become an own goal. By November 1st, the date President Trump set for the new 130% tariffs, the world will be watching closely. Such a massive escalation will shake global trade routes, but it will also test which economy is more resilient. The US with its diversified partners, or China with its centralized control. Beijing wanted to show strength. What it exposed was dependency. From the electronics powering our homes to the metals driving electric vehicles, the modern world still runs through Chinese supply chains. But that dependence is no longer seen as an advantage. It's now a liability. The rare earth chokehold that once made China untouchable has become a warning sign for every nation that built its industries on cheap Chinese imports. This is not just a trade war anymore. It's a struggle over who defines the next phase of globalization: open markets or controlled economies. And as the United States doubles down, building alliances and diversifying supply chains, China is discovering that power built on monopoly can vanish the moment others decide to compete. The world is witnessing a seismic shift, one that will determine who controls the engines of modern industry, who writes the rules of trade, and who holds the real economic power in the decades to come.